Among the reasons this is an amazing and exceptional Shabbat is because it's one of only 7 throughout the whole year when we have a double Torah portion, and this is the only Sabbath when one of the double portions finishes an entire book of the Torah, the 4th book of Numbers, Bamidbar. Chapters 30 to the last word of the book of Numbers in chapter 36. The portion begins with what were called cities of refuge, 6 cities of asylum for guilty parties seeking safety from angry mobs. This reflects the Torah's call for justice and compassionate law versus vengeance or bloodshed. And upon arrival at one of these cities, unintentional murderers presented themselves to elders who offered hospitality. Once arrested, they were taken to a court where it was determined whether they were guilty of premeditated or involuntary manslaughter. If judged guilty of premeditated murder, they received the death penalty. If guilty of unintentional homicide, they were allowed to live rent and tax-free in the sanctuary city during the lifetime of the incumbent high priest. After his death, they could return to their home cities without fear of harm from avengers. The notion of the cities of asylum arose out of the need to end family feuds by taking the process of law out of the hands of private individuals. The cities of asylum were meant to be rebirth places where a person tormented by the shame and guilt of having accidentally done something so horrible as taking a life will be able to surmount the anguish and rebuild a creative human life again. Hard to imagine that today, but this is what the Torah envisions at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. The portion ends with women's rights, specifically the inheritance rights of daughters who have no brothers when their father dies. But it's the middle I want to focus on, not the troubling chapter that this bar mitzvah, Nate London, has chosen to tackle concerning the Israelites carrying out a vicious war against the Midianites, which Jewish scholars through the centuries, including Nate London, have serious questions about and difficulty with. We clearly must study certain sections of the Torah in the context of their own time, and you'll hear Nate do that tomorrow morning. My message tonight may be summed up in the name itself of this week's double Torah portion. Family tribes, that's the first word, matot. And what's the second word? Mas'eh. What does it mean? Journeys. Family tribes and journeys. The opening of Mas'eh reads, Ela Mas'eh v'nei Yisrael asher yatzu me'eretz Mitzrayim. These are the journeys of the children of Israel who went out of the land of Egypt. From Ramses to Sukkot, from this place to that place. I'm not exaggerating. Chapter 3 lists 42 places they went from. It's like a triptych, which led one modern commentator to embellish the triptych. They went from Ramses to Sukkot, from Eastern Europe to Ellis Island, from Brooklyn to Delray Beach, from Jersey to Queens, from Manhattan to Memphis, from San Antonio to Collierville. You get the picture. The larger backdrop behind this week in the Torah is the idea of the wandering Jew, not the plant. Our ancestors who left slavery in Egypt experienced a 40-year interlude of wandering in the name of this book, the Midbar, the wilderness. and we've been wanderers ever since. One commentator, Rabbi Greenstein, wisely notes, and I quote, "The Torah would have us believe that the wandering was the momentary means, not the permanent end. However, a cursory look at Jewish history reveals that the reality has been the opposite. The majority of our years as a Jewish people have been spent wandering and moving. Did you know that of the 5 books in the Torah, 3.5 take place in the desert? And when we arrive at the edge of the land of Israel, finally at the end of Deuteronomy, come this September, the cycle ends, and what do? We go back to the Garden of Eden in Genesis, and we wander again from there. Rootlessness, Rabbi Greenstein writes about in his article, teaches that rootlessness was not only true in ancient times, it also typifies our times. The average American now moves 10 times during his or her lifetime. And what do we call this phenomenon? Not displacement, but mobility. It warms my heart looking at a graduate of Temple Israel who's moved to Kentucky, that she probably has a 901 area code phone number still. People, when they move, hold on to that number. The story of moving from place to place is now fashionable, but there's a risk involved. There's great value to setting down roots. It can lend permanence, security, and a sense of home, which our temple has been for the wandering Jew since 7 years before the Civil War to this very night. The listing of all those places our people lived isn't really about the places. It's about remembering that the goal is not the final destination, but the journey itself. As one temple member wisely noted to me recently, it's not even about enjoying the journey of life, because not everything in life is enjoyable. It's about experiencing the all of life, the bitter and the sweet, savoring the simchas, the happy times, and surviving whatever befalls us on the journey. So next week we begin Book 5, Deuteronomy. Moses will look back on his life. But before Moses gives his final words to the children of Israel, the Torah bids us to remember, as our prayer book reminds us, that while birth may be a beginning and death a destination, this lifetime is a journey, a going and growing from age to age and stage to stage, until looking backward or ahead we see that victory in life does not lie at some high place along the way. Victory in life lies in experiencing as much of the journey as we can. Maybe that's why, my friends, this week's Torah portion was not named Ye'adim, destinations, but instead Mas'eh, journeys. Because in the end, as the rabbis teach, life is a journey, and what matters most on our personal life journeys is not only what we see, but what we notice. Not only what we hear, but what we pay attention to. It's what we listen to and what we respond to along the way that determines the meaning of our lives. Amen.